bit about just me and my faith in the Word. I've been a believer pretty much my whole life, but most of the time I've spent my time as a believer in the New Testament. I always saw the Old Testament as a bunch of random stories or these names that I didn't find relevance on my life, or a bunch of hard words to pronounce, let alone understand. And so a lot of my time as a believer has been in the New Testament. And as I've gotten older, I've come to find that there's a lot of nuggets of truth and beauty in the Old Testament. And one of the things that I love so much about Hawaii and the people here is when you ask someone, hey, what ethnicity are you? They're able to recall all the different ethnicities that they're made up with, even if it's like 8 or 10 different kinds. And that's so beautiful because you know where you come from. And in order to know who you are today or where you're going, it's really important to know where you come from. And the same thing applies spiritually. How can we know who we are if we don't know where we come from spiritually? And so it's so important to be able to know the stories of the different characters in the Old Testament and to know how the Lord was working back then and to see, hey, this could be how He's working in our lives today. So I just pray so bad, and I want to encourage you guys to find some time and to go back to the Old Testament and to pray to God that He would just discipline you and that He would teach you His truth through the Old Testament, because there's so many rich stories that apply to our lives today. So we're going to take it back to Genesis 12, and if Davin, if you could read for us Genesis 12, 1 to 3, as Davin gets that prepared. We're going to read about God's promise of redemption. It's a story of God saying, I will do what I will say I will do. And so with that said, if Davin, if you could read with your amazing voice, Genesis 12, 1 through 3, please.
The Lord had said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I have showed you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you and make you famous. And you will be a blessing to others, and I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who treat you with contempt. All families on earth will be blessed through you.
Thank you. Yeah. You see, again, the story of Abraham, God chose one man, and that was Abraham. And it was to rescue the world from sin. He promised to make Abraham into a great nation, to make his name great and to bless him so that he would be a blessing to every family of the earth. You see, this is a story that makes you leave everything behind and to step out in faith. I want you to just think about that. Here's Abraham. He's 75 years old. He was 75 years old when he heard the Lord tell him to go. He had his wife. He had no idea where he was going, had no family out there, had no idea what was to come. All he heard was the Lord told him, go. 75 years old. Can you imagine that? Imagine right now, one morning, waking up and hearing the Lord audibly. You could literally hear Him tell you, go. I want you to leave Hawaii, and I want you to go to this place. Imagine having to go move to the mainland in a cold state. I know you guys like your warm weather and whatnot, but imagine moving to a foreign place. You don't know what that's going to look like. You have no family there. You have no job there. All you know is that the Lord's calling you to go out and go. He was 75 years old, and he left with his wife to this country. Imagine, I want you just to take that moment, hearing God tell you to leave. What would be invoked in you? Probably, I don't know about you, but I'd be feeling anxious. I'd be feeling scared. Would you go? Would you trust? You see, Abraham's job was to step out and to let God do the heavy lifting. Our job is just the same. It's to step out and to trust. You see, God daily has a plan to put in motion in our lives. The question is, will you go? And I want you to just think about that. Here's a man who is 75 years old. The Lord tells him to go, and he leaves. Maybe we don't hear God telling us to leave our country or our place, but I guarantee daily, He's calling you out in your work, in your dreams, in your relationships, in your family. He's calling you out to go. Maybe there's this area within your heart where you just feel unsettled in your workplace, where you just feel like, your passions and your talents, they're not really being lived out. Maybe in your relationship with another, in your marriage, or if you're dating someone right now, and you don't find yourself just fully following the will of God and the passion and the truth and just everything that a relationship is supposed to stem from isn't quite there. You feel like the Lord is calling you out to a different path or a change in the relationship, but for some reason, something's holding you in. Or what about your dreams? your dreams for your family, for your profession, or whatever dreams you have in your heart right now. But it's so easy for us as human beings to settle for that practicality, what's safe. And God desires so much more than that. He desired it back then, and he desires it back now, here now for us. You know, he gives us permission. It's crazy to think like, okay, so God's calling me out. I'm feeling all this fear. I don't know what is to come. He gives us permission to question him, and he gives us permission to wrestle with him. You see, throughout the Bible, there's so many times where you hear about people lamenting. Lamenting is another word for crying out. They cried out to God. They wrestled with him. I don't understand why this is happening. And the beauty about crying out to God and wrestling with God is this, the community of the church. And that's what's so beautiful, is that we have each other here to cry out together, to question together. I don't understand why this is happening, but can you join me? Can you join me in prayer? Can you advocate for me? And that's the beauty about belonging to a church family, a church community like this. We can wrestle together through the hard things. So daily he calls us out again, like he did with Abraham. God is big enough to handle our questions. He's God, the creator of our universe. So with all that said, I'm thinking about faith, and I couldn't help but to think about, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm really random in my thoughts. I think about acrobats. How many of you guys have ever seen like a Cirque du Soleil or acrobatic performers, kind of like circus style, where you see a flyer flying from a trapeze? By a show of hands, how many of you guys have seen a show like that before? Okay, awesome. That means I'm not the only one here. Kevin and I, my husband and I, have seen different Cirque du Soleil shows, and they're amazing shows of artistry, of flying and spinning. So you see, I want to give an example, a trapeze flyer. You know, there's like this bar, and this person is swinging high in the air, and they do all of these crazy aerial maneuvers, and someone catches them in the end. And, you know, I was thinking about this, and I thought, whoa, this is much more than an amazing show. Rather, it's theology in motion. And I was able to find so much of what the Lord was trying to teach me in watching these shows. You see, a lot of times people look at that flyer, they look at that person who's just spinning in the air as the main star of the show. But what many people forget is that it truly is up to that catcher that catches that flyer, that enables them to soar high in the air. You see, a lot of times we, in our narcissistic world, in our society that we live in, we tend to think that we're the star of our own show, and yet the Lord humbles us, and he is actually the main star in our show. He is the catcher of our lives. You see, it is only up to that catcher where that guy or that girl is able to soar, for them to have that confidence and courage. How different would our lives be if we truly believed that God, our Father, was the catcher, that he will always catch us no matter what?